So I guess this proves it. Hills Have Eyes, that's a one and done idea. Stop there. So The Hills Have Eyes 2 tells the story of a group of National Guard that get preyed upon by cannibalistic mutants that are looking for women to breed. Welcome back to The Hills Have Eyes, a little detour in my Wes Craven review series, and now we are at the final film, the sequel to the remake, The Hills Have Eyes 2. This is a film that I have seen before. I believe I saw it in 2007 when this came out. It came out a year after the remake, so very quick turnaround. Thought it was fine back then, but I also thought that the remake was fine, of which I'm much more of a fan of now that I have rewatched it. So I was actually a little excited to put this movie on and see if my renewed appreciation for that remake would give me a little bit of renewed appreciation for this sequel. And before I say whether or not I did have renewed love for this sequel, please hit the subscribe button down below. Let me know your thoughts on The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. We're going to do a ranking of all 4 of The Hills Have Eyes movies, and also if you're just joining me, I'm in the middle of a Wes Craven review series. My next film is The Serpent and the Rainbow. So if you're a fan of Wes Craven, who created this franchise, please also hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss the rest of that review series and that inevitable gigantic ranking of all of Wes Craven's films. So starting off with the positives for The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, I like the storyline of putting actual US soldiers against these cannibalistic mutants. They're somebody that can actually pose somewhat of a threat. They have weapons, they have training, they have the numbers. And so while the first film is very much about these very out in the open, out of their element family that is just going to get laid to waste by these cannibals, it's their home turf, that kind of flips the script a little bit. You know, these are people that are trained to take out terrorists, to take out military groups, and now they're against these cannibal mutants. They should be able to do some damage. So that whole setup, that whole premise of the second film, I appreciate. Certainly a lot more interesting than a group of motocross racers. We'll just agree on that, right? I really liked Derek Mears, his performance and his character. His character's like a mutant that has like a rock-like quality to like half of his skin, so almost every sequence that he's in, he's able to like hide amongst the rocks or amongst the hills, and even those shots where in the camera, you can't quite tell he's there until he starts to move. It's a really nice effect. And there's even a sequence later on where he's in this little cavern in the dark and the guy's only defense is just to shoot at random points, and finally hits just one little moment where he gets him in the dark, and you just hear that he got him. So Derek Mears, of course, I've gone on record, he's my favorite Jason Voorhees. He is a horror icon in my mind. I want to see this guy do more things, and this was actually before he got to play Jason. So I liked seeing his name in the opening credits, getting excited for, oh wait, I forgot he was in here, and then seeing that his character was actually the one that stood out the most to me, probably amongst both of the Hills Have Eyes films. This one is very bittersweet, but I grew up in the golden age of the Disney Channel original movies, all of the classic TV shows, and so I like seeing Lee Thompson Young in this movie. Of course, those of you that are in my generation recognize him as Jet Jackson. That was one of my favorite shows growing up, one of my favorite Disney Channel original movies growing up, and he was a guy that I had not seen anything from until I watched this movie. The bittersweet side of it is this was the last thing that I saw him in. He inevitably took his life years later, so it's a very sad thing to kind of bring up, but anything that ties me to my childhood, it gives me that little bit of comfort, even just something as small as a familiar face, I enjoy. He's honestly the one thing about this movie that I remembered, that when I walked into it, I remembered, oh yeah, Jet Jackson's in this movie. And we'll see what time allows as far as what I remember about this. Maybe Derek Mears will probably stick around too, but he's probably going to be the one element of this movie that I always remember it for. Moving on to the mixed, there is a lot of plot focus here on this cannibalistic group trying to get women to breed, to thick their numbers back out after so many of them have been killed from the first film. And the side of it that's really gritty and really crazy and really disgusting, which is what they're going for, like including the opening scene where a woman is literally giving birth and then bludgeoned to death, that's something that's really gross and effective and certainly fits into that very grimy side of storytelling that this franchise lives in. In the other side of things, it also kind of dips its toes into the problem that I have with Last House on the Left and the original Hills Have Eyes and movies like that. The whole sexual assault, revenge style horror flick, of which this is really just not so much the revenge side, just the assault side. I don't need that in a movie. Sometimes I guess it's necessary, sometimes it makes sense, certainly for realism, and they can't tell this story without really going for it, without showing something like that, but I've gone on record numerous times, it just does nothing for me. It does nothing but kind of diminish my experience. And now moving on to the negatives, despite the fact that I like the setup of this movie, and I like the premise of having this group of National Guard there, and that they should be able to be some kind of a force to be reckoned with, they're not. Their characters themselves are pretty garbage. I mean, there's a couple of characters that stand out. I do like Lee Thompson-Young's character, a little bit more of the good soldier type. There's another character who's very much kind of the nerdy one that everybody tells to shut up, and he eventually is the smart one that prevails, while all the loudmouths and chest pumpers, they're the ones that kind of get taken out one by one. But for a cast of characters where there's literally like 10 of them, you don't remember very many of them, and they're not very interesting. They're not acted all that well. They're not written all that well, so I don't even know if you can really blame the actor, but they're just a bunch of caricatures. I mean, you've got a guy here that has kind of made a career out of playing the stereotypical Hispanic character. He was big in Next Friday. I remember him from the movie Airborne, going back to Disney Channel. But he is the most annoying character here because it's just like, okay, you're the loudmouth. Go. That's your whole script. You're gonna bitch about everything. You're gonna puff your chest out at everything. You're not gonna listen to anybody, and you're just gonna get a bunch of people killed because you're an asshole. And that's a caricature in and of itself, and he plays it to a T. And then you have other characters that are like the big bumbling dumbass, a guy that would never be in the National Guard because not only is he too overweight, but he's out of shape, he can't do anything. They don't allow that kind of thing in the military, or they tape you. There's a whole process. It's a movie, I understand that, but you got the guy that's like the extreme comedic version of what like Vincent D'Onofrio was in Full Metal Jacket, and that's his entire caricature. Of course, you got the loudmouth colonel, or the loudmouth leader, I'm sorry, I don't know ranks, to where he is just screaming at everybody the entire movie. He's trying to do the Arlie Ermy thing. And so you just don't really get any development here. You don't get any relationships. There's nothing that makes these characters stand out, nothing that makes you care about them. It's just stock caricatures in BDUs out in the desert, getting killed one by fucking one because they pose no threat whatsoever to especially Derek Mears, but nobody in this movie. Now, I talked about the writing for the characters, but just the writing in general is very off for this movie as well. There's attempts at humor, there's attempts at weird little scenes. I mean, there's literally a guy that crawls out of a shitter, and for one, I don't understand the logic there. I don't understand how he got there, how you fit a whole human in there, and why he waited until the guy was shitting on him to reach his hand out. I don't know. That's the weirdest solitary moment in this entire franchise, is a guy climbing out of a porta potty covered in shit, and he's got cuts all over him. So I don't know if that was supposed to be like a torture thing, like sepsis. We're gonna cut the fuck out of him and then throw him in shit. I don't know. Somebody give me answers on that scene.
Who was that guy? Shitman the Barbarian. I have no idea.
But that's just an extreme example of the writing of this movie. It's very much evident that this was like, okay, Hills Have Eyes was a big hit. Write something, and we got to get this shit in front of cameras in like 3 months. Going along with that, the entire inciting incident that we are given for why the National Guard is sent in is because of the events of the first film, which honestly I don't think they got very specific of whether or not Doug and the kids came out and told them, hey, there's fucking mutants over there, or if they just found their, I don't know. But because of the events of the first film, the military goes in to try to kind of set up something and clear out these mutants, and they send scientists. The movie opens up with scientists out in this murder desert, and they get murdered. And then the National Guard isn't even sent in because, oh fuck, our scientists are dead. We haven't heard from them in days. No, they're sent in to resupply them. Like, hey, go give them shit. You're making our military look really incompetent in this movie. I mean, for fuck's sake, you said there's enemies, there's mutants there with axes and shit. All right, well, send the science guys. And then when we don't hear from them, you know what? I haven't heard from them in a while. They must be thirsty. Send these trainees out there. What the fuck? And of course, we build to not only a cliche ending, but the same exact ending that we got in the first film, where you get 2 or 3 characters that triumph amongst the evil just to show somebody shut a laptop like, ugh, sequel. Of course, we never got that sequel, but Can we be a little more creative with the stinger for the sequel? Just a little bit? I mean, fuck, a year later you use the same ending? Just a little bit? And my final negative is that if you're gonna give me a movie like this, where we're not gonna put a whole lot of time and effort into the story, we're not gonna put a whole lot of time and effort into the characters, or this initial setup, we're just trying to get cannon fodder out there to show you a bunch of bloody, nasty kills, well then give me a bunch of bloody, nasty kills. I mean, there's not a whole lot in this movie that really stands out. The violence and the gruesome brutality of the first film way overshadows this movie. I mean, you got people getting their arms chopped off, falling to their death. You got people getting lines snapped because they're falling to their death. People get shot eventually. There's a couple of stabbings and stuff, but there's nothing really overly gruesome about this movie that I noticed. So I'm all fine with a really garbage, trashy slasher movie as long as it can be entertaining and can be carnage filled. This movie really missed the mark on that for me. So overall, guys, not a whole lot to talk about with this movie. It's pretty much exactly what I remembered, unlike the remake, which actually surprised me with how much more I liked it after years have passed. This, I understand why I watched it once and immediately forgot about everything except Jet Jackson. So is it better than the original Hills Have Eyes Part 2? We're going to talk about that in the ranking. I don't know if I would say it's better. It's certainly not as memorable as the Hills Have Eyes Part 2. Sometimes how bad you are makes you stand out more. But nonetheless, we are now at another Hills Have Eyes sequel that pretty much killed what could have been a franchise. So if you're a fan of the Hills Have Eyes remake and you want to see what the sequel brings, really lower your expectations. You might get some dumb fun out of this, but it is nowhere near on the caliber of either of the two original Hills Have Eyes films. So unfortunately, gonna have to tell you to skip it. So what do you guys think of the Hills Have Eyes 2? Do you prefer this sequel to the original sequel? Do you prefer this sequel to either of the original Hills Have Eyes movies, both the Wes Craven one and the remake from the year prior? Let me know your thoughts down below. And do you think that the Hills Have Eyes actually could work as a franchise and they just stumbled at the sophomore movie? Or do you think that's just a one and done idea? Because I kind of tend to land in that category now. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the Hills Have Eyes ranking coming out here next week, as well as the rest of my Wes Craven review series and that inevitable ranking. So please join us for all of that carnage-filled fun. We're also going to be talking about a lot of Batman over the next week because we got the new Batman coming out. I got a couple movies I want to review, and of course we're going to do a bunch of giant rankings, not only with the movies, but the Batman, the villains. We're going to talk Batman for a while, so total tangent. If you're a Batman fan, also stick around for that. Thank you guys for watching, as always, and remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.